Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us inside the Americas. Here's a look at what's coming up in today's show. Illegal immigrants across the United States are trembling over a promise from Donald Trump to increase deportations. You'll meet a few of them in just a moment. Then the U.S. Justice Department is seeking close to $100 million in damages against doping-disgraced cycling icon Lance Armstrong. This week, a U.S. judge ruled those allegations deserve to be heard in court. And a small town in Brazil is trying out a financial experiment that's got many people buzzing. More on that unconditional universal basic income on the way. I'm Jeannie Godula. The already chaotic Trump administration got hit with its most dramatic turn this week with the departure of U.S. National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. He was fired for misleading the vice president about his talks with the Russian ambassador before Donald Trump took office. The U.S. Justice Department already warned Trump weeks ago that Flynn, who was one of his closest advisors, could be subject to blackmail from the Russians. Here's more from the White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer on just why Trump sat on that knowledge for so long.
When the president heard the information as presented by White House counsel, he instinctively thought the General Flynn did not do anything wrong. The issue here was that the president got to the point where General Flynn's relationship, misleading the vice president and others, or the possibility that he had forgotten critical details of this important conversation, had created a critical mass and an unsustainable situation.
The Flynn affair is still gaining steam as both U.S. intelligence agencies and Congress say they're continuing to investigate Russia's alleged involvement in the election. And a report from the New York Times says multiple Trump aides had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence officials before the election, unusual in their frequency. That furor over Michael Flynn overshadowed Trump's travel ban, blocking entry to immigrants from 7 mostly Muslim countries that's still on legal standby. But Trump says he has made good on promises to increase deportation raids inside the United States. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement say the arrests are routine, but in many Latino communities, the fear is still very real. And immigration advocacy groups say this is just the start of mass deportations under President Trump. Our Washington correspondent Philip Crowther reports.
Illegal immigrants in the United States have always lived in fear and in hiding, but since the ascent of Donald Trump, their worries have increased. Social workers need to explain to these immigrants, for example, what they should do in case of an arrest.
I will only speak in the presence of my lawyer, and that's it. You say nothing more. I know very well that facing intimidation is tough. It's very difficult to handle such a situation. The fear of the immigration police that comes here almost every day.
Illegal immigrants are trying to find shelter from the raids. Centers like this one allow immigrants to look for work without having to wait on the street. It's entirely funded through private donations. Fernando prefers to use an alias. Here, he feels that little bit safer.
There is a lot of tension in the Hispanic community and among all undocumented immigrants in general at the moment because of the police raids, because of what we see in the news and the alerts we read on social media.
Cesar is the only worker here who is willing to talk openly about the immigration raids that the president had promised on the campaign trail.
We've come here to improve our lives and those of our families. What this new president, Donald Trump, is doing is unfair.
Anguished voicemail messages are left on the phone of this immigration lawyer. She represents undocumented workers who say that even those with a right to work in the country are now in a state of uncertainty.
But the situation now has changed completely. It's changed the way I've had to give advice to clients because we have to be really cognizant that anybody could be at risk.
Some NGOs say that Trump's willingness to crack down on illegal immigration has given the police a license to do more.
They might have 6 seats in the van, and they would make sure that all of those seats were full. They would find the one person who they wanted, but then take advantage to try to get some collateral arrests as well.
Barack Obama is still by far the president who has deported the largest amount of illegal immigrants.
Donald Trump, meanwhile, had 2 high-profile visits this week. He first sat down with a man who could be described as his polar opposite, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The two did their best to be civil, if not warm, particularly given Trudeau's more welcoming stance on immigration. Trump then met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who went into that meeting hoping to improve on the previously chilly ties he had with Barack Obama. Donald Trump backed Netanyahu during the campaign, but has softened that hardline stance since getting to the White House. In other news from across the Americas, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is demanding an apology from the United States. That's after Washington slapped sanctions on the Venezuelan vice president for alleged drug trafficking. The new U.S. Treasury Secretary said the move against VP Tarek El-Aissami was part of a broad crackdown on drug trafficking and, quote, terrorism. Venezuela has so far been cautious in its approach to Donald Trump, who has yet to detail his position on the country. And some of the close to 200,000 evacuated near the Oroville Dam in California are returning home. Officials told people living below the country's tallest dam to leave earlier this week after a hole was found that could have provoked massive flooding. Evacuees have now been told they can return, but that they may have to flee again if repairs made to the battered dam spillways don't hold. Now, cycling great Lance Armstrong is heading to court. This week, a U.S. District Court judge cleared the way for the doping-disgraced icon to go on trial. The U.S. Justice Department is seeking close to $100 million in damages, saying Armstrong cheated the government when the American Postal Service sponsored his team. Armstrong had asked for the case to be thrown out, calling the claims unfounded, but the judge disagreed, saying the allegations deserve to be heard in court.
From deity to disgrace. To many, Lance Armstrong was the cancer survivor turned superhero, a symbol of America's supremacy in sport. He won the Tour de France a record 7 consecutive times from 1999 to 2005. But that was before he found himself at the heart of one of the world's biggest doping scandals. The 45-year-old was stripped of his 7 Tour de France titles and banned from cycling for life in August 2012. After years of denial, he admitted to using drugs in all 7 of his Tour wins in 2013.
That's like saying we have to have air in our tyres or to have water in our bottles. That was, in my view, part of the job.
Lance Armstrong is now accused of cheating the US government when the US Postal Service sponsored the team he led between 2000 and 2004. The $100 million lawsuit was initially filed by Armstrong's former teammate Floyd Landis in 2010. He was joined by the US Justice Department 3 years later. Under American law, Landis, who himself admitted to using drugs throughout his career, stands to obtain 25% of any money recovered by the US government. The total is estimated to be 3 times the sponsorship money paid to the team by the US Postal Service. Armstrong's lawyers say the agency benefited from Armstrong's media exposure and turned a blind eye to doping allegations. The case will now be presented in front of a jury.
The jury will have to weigh up all the evidence and determine the damages caused to the U.S. Postal Service. But it will also have to look at whether the agency benefited from its sponsorship of Armstrong's team and Armstrong's global media exposure, not only in terms of reputation, but also new clients.
It won't be the first time Armstrong faces fraud charges. In 2015, an arbitration panel ordered him to pay $10 million to SCA Promotions, a company that gave him $12 million in bonuses during his career.
Next, how would you like to get free money every month, no strings attached? Well, that notion of what's called a universal basic income is gaining traction around the world, with governments and think tanks increasingly fascinated with the idea. Here's more now from one seaside town in Brazil that's already trying it out.
This Brazilian pharmacy accepts a special kind of payment, the Mumbuca card. Topped up each month by town hall, the card can be used to buy essential goods.
This Mumbuca card is something that reassures us. We know it contains money. We can go to a shop and buy things. They've taken my family allowance from me, but I have my Mumbuca card.
The Mumbuca card is being implemented in the Rio suburb of Marica. The idea is that each of the city's 150,000 inhabitants will receive 100 Mumbuca a month. That's about 30 euros. The only condition to have lived in Marica for the past year. The program was launched by the city's ex-mayor.
When we give a bit to everyone, the message we're sending out is that societies not only in Marica but in all cities in all countries of the world are obliged to guarantee an unconditional basic income for everyone.
It's not the path chosen on the national scale, with the right-wing government imposing strict austerity. Critics say an unconditional basic income will do nothing to reduce unemployment, currently at a record high.
What we need is for people to have the dignity to earn their own livelihood. I think a person is much happier if they have a job in their city, if there's a decent hospital, dignified service. Today that's not the case. It's not 85 reals that will save someone's life.
In January, Finland also began experimenting with basic income. France's socialist candidate Benoît Hamon